Some people are remembered through a single image. For Patsy Ramsey, the public image was polished, theatrical, emotional, devoted, and impossible to separate from the tragedy that followed. But the most dangerous thing true crime can do is turn a public image into a criminal conclusion. A polished mother is not proof of manipulation. A dramatic personality is not proof of deception. A person who values beauty, achievement, or presentation is not automatically hiding a crime. The JonBenet Ramsey homicide remains open. This episode does not identify Patsy Ramsey as responsible for her daughter's death. What we are examining is the complicated psychology of image, duty, caregiving, and pressure, using Enneagram language as a lens, never as evidence. The primary Enneagram lens for Patsy's public persona is Type 3, the achiever. Type 3 is not just vanity. At its core, it is about worth. The Type 3 survival rule is, I must become someone impressive enough to deserve love, respect, and safety. At its healthiest, that energy can create courage, polish, adaptability, stamina, and the ability to perform under pressure. A Type 3 can walk into a room terrified and still make the room believe everything is under control. But the shadow side is image fusion. That is when the person begins to feel that the image is not simply something they present. It is something they must protect in order to survive. This is where a public figure can look especially confusing to outsiders. The polished exterior can be mistaken for lack of feeling. The desire for control can be mistaken for deception. The ability to speak publicly can be mistaken for rehearsed guilt. Those are not the same things. The question is not whether Patsy was a Type 3. The question is whether her public role reflects Type 3-like pressure, presentation, achievement, appearance, and the fear of public collapse. Now add a possible Type 2 secondary pattern, the helper. Type 2 energy wants to be loved through care, devotion, service, and emotional connection. In a family system, this can create a parent who is highly involved, highly attentive, highly invested in making life beautiful, organized, memorable, and emotionally meaningful. The light side is generosity. The shadow side is over-identification. When a caregiver's identity becomes bound up in being needed, the line between my child is thriving and I am succeeding as a parent can become emotionally tangled. That is not a moral failure. It is a human pressure point. Many parents experience it. Many high-achieving parents experience it even more intensely, and it is why family systems can become fragile under public scrutiny. When a person's identity is built around caregiving and presentation, a crisis does not only threaten their life, it threatens the story they believed their life was telling. The third pattern that may help explain the public presentation is Type 1 energy, the reformer. Type 1 energy is built around standards. It says, there is a right way to do things. I need to be responsible. I need to hold myself together. I need to make things right. At its healthiest, that becomes integrity, effort, and moral seriousness. Under stress, it can become relentless self-criticism, rigidity, and a deep fear of being seen as flawed. Now place Type 3 image pressure, Type 2 caregiving pressure, and Type 1 perfection pressure into the same public crisis. The inner experience could be devastating. I have to hold the family together. I have to protect the people I love. I have to survive public judgment. I cannot fall apart. And when someone cannot fall apart privately, their emotional expression in public may look chaotic, theatrical, defensive, or inconsistent. That does not tell us why a crime happened. It tells us why public behavior should never be treated like a shortcut to truth. Every family has a public-facing person. Sometimes it is the father who carries authority. Sometimes it is the mother who carries the emotional atmosphere. Sometimes it is the child who carries the family's hope, image, or dreams. In a family under public pressure, roles can become even more rigid. The caretaker becomes responsible for everybody's feelings. The achiever becomes responsible for looking composed. The perfectionist becomes responsible for avoiding mistakes. And when a crisis breaks through, the person can be judged not only for what happened, but for how well they perform grief. That is a cruel position. True crime audiences often expect one correct version of pain. Quiet but not too quiet, emotional but not too emotional, angry but not defensive, polished but not rehearsed. But there is no universally correct performance of grief. The Enneagram is not only about individuals, it is also about relational loops. A Type 3-like person may need achievement and affirmation. A Type 2-like person may need closeness and appreciation. A Type 1-like person may need order and moral clarity. In a family, those needs can reinforce each other. The caregiver creates the image. The image brings affirmation. The affirmation strengthens the role. The role becomes harder to step away from. Then, when the family is attacked from the outside, loyalty can become the central survival strategy. Not necessarily loyalty to wrongdoing. Loyalty to family identity. Loyalty to one another. Loyalty to the version of life that existed before the crisis. This is why your analysis needs to remain careful. Families under accusation can close ranks for many reasons. That behavior does not prove what happened inside the home. Patsy's public arc, as the public saw it, moved from family image to national target. She became one of the most analyzed mothers in American true crime history. Her voice, style, affect, and every visible emotion became material for strangers to interpret. But the psychological question is not, was she too polished? The question is, what does it do to a person whose identity is tied to competence, caregiving, and presentation when the public turns those same strengths into evidence against them? The Type 3 shadow says, I must preserve the image. The Type 2 shadow says, I must protect my people. The Type 1 shadow says, I must not be wrong. Under extreme pressure, all three can create a person who appears more controlled, more defensive, or more emotionally intense than observers expect. That is a human explanation for public complexity, not a conclusion about guilt. Maybe you recognize this pattern in yourself. Maybe you learned early that you had to look put together. Maybe your value became connected to achievement, beauty, service, parenting, or holding everybody else together. Maybe you are the person who looks strongest right before you collapse. The question is not whether you are fake. The question is whether you have been using performance to survive. And if you have, what would it feel like to be valued when you are not achieving, fixing, pleasing, or protecting an image? That is the deeper Enneagram work.